Well, welcome everyone. And this is going to be, I hope, a moving, inspiring, provocative hour where we really talk about what's happening with our kids because of social media and the effect that social media is having on children and on teens and what we can do about it. And I have a packed agenda for this hour. So I'm going to try, which I don't do very well, to be a timekeeper. For those who don't know me, my name is Randi Weingarten. I am the president of the AFT, and you see the backdrop here because we are in Washington. We've all taken our COVID tests. We're all negative here. We all are doing this without our masks, but we wanted to be together for this conversation. And I am here today with someone who should need no introduction because she has been an amazing shero, Frances Haugen. You may know her as the whistleblower of Facebook, but she's going to talk after I talk for a couple of minutes just about what she saw and why she's done what she's done. And look, we are really grateful that you have been out there and really kind of blowing the whistle on all of this so that we can make things better. And then with Frances Haugen, we have the current president of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, Dr. Warren Eng, who also happens, like me, to kind of come from and hang out in the upper west side of New York City. So it's so great to see you here in Washington. And even though she couldn't be with us today in person, she's with us on Zoom or with us virtually. And that is the Director of Online Safety at Parents Together, Dalia Hashad. And there's Dalia as well. And that's going to be our first half an hour. And then we have a really special second half an hour as well. So look, the last few years, I mean, this is Teacher Appreciation Week. And I think that people know this, whether you're a parent, whether you're a guardian, whether you're a caretaker, whether you're a student, or whether you're an educator, and frankly, almost anyone else in the world. It's been 2 years like no other. We've dealt with COVID and disinformation and radicalization. And, we've always had issues around schools, and teachers have always had to juggle so much. But the last 2 years has stretched us beyond anything that most of us have ever known. AFT members worked around the clock from the beginning on the front lines, keeping students engaged, patients cared for, and our community safe. We have, by the way, 200,000 nurses that we represent and about 200,000 public employees that we represent, in addition to teachers and school staff from pre-K to higher education. Our nurses have helped people get tested and treated and vaccinated, and we're at the bedsides during some of the worst of times during COVID. The teachers and the paras and the bus drivers, from driving MiFi and Wi-Fi hotspots to food for kids, to picking up papers for teachers, to going from remote to hybrid to in-person, and then all this again over and over, being the lifeline of kids. I say this often, we have learned to MacGyver better than MacGyver because of what has happened in the last 2 years. But our kids are in crisis. And we had a mental health crisis before COVID, but and Dr. Eng will talk about this far better than I do, but for 2 years of disruption, 2 years of looking at the screens, 2 years of not having a normal kind of routine and rhythm, recovery is really tough. And it's not a shock that a lot of kids, frankly, a lot of adults, are still under tremendous stress and anxiety. And it's apt that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, And for parents and teachers and people who care about kids, frankly, every month should be Mental Health Awareness Month, as I'm looking at Dr. Eng. And, and so we need to deal with a lot of those issues writ large.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a secret for you, which is that we have been. And the people who work in our nation's public schools have been on the front lines as first responders to poverty, to local crises like gun violence, to national tragedies like hurricanes and floods and fires. I could go through the 10 plagues just in the last few months. But we have to work arm in arm, hand in hand, social distance or not, with parents and with communities, because every day, communities, parents, guardians, kids, they're putting their faith in us, and we have to work together to make things better. So it should be not a surprise that we, an education union, would be raising a giant red flag on something that poses an immediate danger, a real danger to all of our kids. Because on top of the isolation, on top of the trauma, frankly, in New York City, my home city, 8,400 kids lost their parents to COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So on top of all of that, there's social media. And Facebook, which is the big dog here, has played an important role, yes, in connecting us. I remember when we put a lot of pictures of dogs and cats and talked to our relatives on Facebook years and years and years ago. But they've also done an unreasonable share of harm with some of the decisions they've made. I've learned a lot of this from Frances and from others. Decisions that they've made that give us less control of what we're seeing, over what we're seeing, and them having less accountability for the things they are promoting, and they get rich off all of this. So we're going to talk about some of that tonight with the people I've introduced, Frances and Warren. Can I call you by your first name?
Please.
Warren and Dahlia. And I want to, thank, as we start with Frances, I just want to one more time thank the American Association of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, Parents Together, and Share My Lesson for working, for hosting this with the AFT so we can have this important conversation. So my first job right now is to introduce, as I said before, one of my sheroes and one of the most courageous people I know, and that's Frances Haugen. Sorry, I do that all the time.
Don't worry.
Thank you. And she's known as the whistleblower, the Facebook whistleblower, but this is what she did. In 2021, she ripped the curtain off what Facebook does. Lots of corporations are pretty, you can't really see what they do. But what we saw and what she explained to us was some of the critical inner workings and the decisions that they were making that had the effect of hurting kids. One of the things I learned from her that I've used a lot now is that the algorithms are such that they put a premium on anger instead of on instead of hope. And so what's happened is that at the highest levels of the company, it was a focus on anger and anxiety. And if you put that together with 2 years of isolation and loneliness, and kids really relying on all of us, really relying on screens, then you see what social media, what the implications are and the negative implications are in terms of our kids, our communities, and our families. And so I just want to say, Frances, thank you for helping unpack this for us and pointing us to a direction of what to do. And I want to turn the floor or the screen over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. One of the reasons why I'm always willing to make time to talk with teachers, to talk with people with parents, is we need to be real clear here. We're facing a public health emergency. The number of kids who are exposed to self-harm content, to eating disorder content, who Facebook has told us for years that it is just a mirror, right? That the only thing that has happened with Instagram is that now that we can see these things that we find unpleasant, but they've always been there. Like we shouldn't blame Facebook for those things. But the reality is that Facebook is not just a mirror. They're an amplifier and they're an inducer. So what does that mean? So in terms of amplification, not all ideas get equally distributed on the platform. And what Facebook's documents said very clearly, and Mark Zuckerberg has even said this almost verbatim in a white paper from 2018. He said, when we prioritize what you see in your feed, so whenever you open Instagram, there's 10,000 pieces of content you could see. They have to go in there and prioritize just a few pieces for you to see first. When they prioritize that content based on the content you're most likely to comment on, to reshare, to put a like on, it puts a bias on content that is more extreme. It could be more polarizing, it could be more divisive. No one set out to do this. No one was like, ooh, I want to have more anger in the world. I want to have more suffering in the world. No one did that. Facebook is full of kind, conscientious people, but they also have a corporate culture that makes it difficult to acknowledge power. And alongside that, it makes it difficult to acknowledge responsibility. So Facebook made this ranking system, this way of prioritizing content, putting together your feed, and they discovered there were these biases. So in the case of teenagers, in case of eating disorders, they found that you could take a brand new account. So that means no friends, no family. So the usual excuses that Facebook provides for why you're seeing these things, they say, you chose your friends, you chose your interests. Like, don't blame us for what you're seeing. It takes two to tango. Like they said this in a blog post. If you take a brand new account, it's not two people tangoing, right? You can start with some very mild interests like healthy eating, healthy recipes, and just click on the first 10 pieces of content each day and, follow any hashtags that you got recommended. And very fast, within 2 or 3 weeks, you get pro-anorexia content and pro-self-harm content. I was interviewed recently by a journalist who had a new baby recently. So he made a brand new account for his baby. The baby only has a few friends who are also other very cute babies. And yet about 10% of the content in his feed, even though the only thing he's ever posted, the only thing any of the other babies' accounts have ever posted is cute baby photos, about 10% of the content in the feed is children suffering. It's children in hospitals with tubes coming out of them. It's dying children, children with cancer, children with deformities. They're clearly things that speak to the fears in a new father's brain. No one inside of Facebook came in and said, this is what we want to do. Scaring new fathers, that's our goal. But what they did do is they turned a blind eye to the fact that their algorithms were reinforcing these biases. So that third level, though, so we talked about the idea of Facebook's a mirror, Facebook's an amplifier. The third level is Facebook as an inducer. So what does it mean to induce behavior? I have the honor of getting to speak at the high school I went to for their graduation in a few weeks. So hello, Iowa City West High. And the principal said, I'm so glad you're coming to speak. The number one thing I spend disciplinary time on is Instagram. And I was so confused. I was like, how could Instagram be the top source of disciplinary time? Which just shows how old I am. And he said, we have an account that I don't know who owns it. I can't get it taken down. Where people go and have anonymous fights and post them on Instagram. That people lure kids into fights and film them. And they get posted on Instagram. And I've asked Facebook over and over again, please take this account down. This account is literally hurting children. Like, it's not like just a mental health harm is real, but this is literally kids with broken bones. Like if we were talking about cars and children were going to the emergency room because of car design, we would be marching. But instead, because Facebook is
suing them for product liability.
Or suing them for product liability. But we're not holding Facebook to the same bar. So the last thing I'll finish with is just to answer this question, why? Like, if we hold children's toys to a product liability standard where you need to demonstrate you did safety by design, why aren't we asking the same thing of products for children, these virtual products for children, especially as we move into the land of the metaverse, which is going to be an emergent harm. And part of that is that Facebook has hidden what's going on its platforms for years. They have been very, very intentional about making sure researchers, academics, medical professionals do not get representative data. And so we may be able to show individual accounts, and many people have. You know, there are journalists who have shown 1,000 accounts at a time that are pro-suicide content. And Facebook will say, oh, you know, you have to report those before we can do anything to them. And so they'll report them and then not take any of them down. And Facebook would come back and say, yes, you found those things, but they're not representative. They're a rounding error. And the thing that changed when my documents came forward was it demonstrated that Facebook had known for years, at least since 2018, that there were severe mental health issues with Instagram. Mental health issues that were substantially higher than for TikTok, Snapchat, or Reddit, because Instagram focuses on bodies and social comparison. And Facebook hid this information from the public even when Congress explicitly asked them for it. They said, oh, the research is mixed. And so now that we have the information, now is the time to act. Because every communication technology we've invented before has been disruptive. And the key thing is that we've always learned and then reacted. This is no different.
You know, I'm going to ask you, before I bring in Dalia and Warren, I'm just going to ask you the one question of Europe has just done something about this. So
exciting.
Could you just tell people what Europe did?
Sure.
And how that could help us here if we adopted it?
Totally.
Or maybe because Europe did it, maybe it will de facto be adopted. But tell our viewers what it was that the EU did.
So my core issue, the thing I've been talking about since the very first time I did Senate testimony, is this concept I call linguistic equity. So it's this idea that you deserve to be safe online no matter what language you speak. And Facebook has been telling us the only way we can be safe is through censorship. And that's just not true. Product design and the way these systems are designed, the algorithmic choices are far, far more important than plucking off a few pieces of bad content. Europe has been paying the costs of Facebook's safety strategy, this idea that we're going to make magical AIs, but only in a few languages. And that's what's going to keep us safe. And so Europe has been paying the consequences because there's 27 member states. There's lots of languages in Europe where there are no safety systems in their language and few moderators. Europe came up with a very interesting strategy to move forward. They said, we're not going to come and say, these are good ideas, these are bad ideas. We're going to come in and say, you need to actually start disclosing the harms and risks of your platform to us. And we need to start talking about safety by design. You need to be responsible for your design processes. You need to be transparent with your data. And guess what? For the first time, we're allowed to get data that we control. Like we, the public, are allowed to ask questions and get firsthand data. We're not going to be filtered by you anymore. Because I think if we could see what was actually happening on the platforms in a representative way, we would be shocked and we would demand change.
Great. So first off, thank you. Francis and I did a webinar for, a couple of weeks ago, and I just learned so much from you. You notice I've been writing on my notes. I just learned so much from you all the time, and I hope all of you who are listening, whether we're live or you see it later, you will be as grateful as I am to just her brilliance and courage. And I'm bringing in two amazing people to join me in this conversation. We've already introduced Dr. Warren Eng, who is the president of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. I'm not sure I could say that 5 times fast. And through his work as medical director, professor, and clinician at the Columbia University Medical Center, he's witnessed how this loss of control we are collectively experiencing over social media is impacting kids from all backgrounds. And then we also have Dalia, who is, for those of you who don't know Parents Together, go to the website. It's amazing. It's an amazing online resource. And Dalia herself is an amazing parent advocate who leads the online resource operation within Parents Together. And they have parenting tips and videos and frankly, lots of really great help that's really accessible. So I wanna just ask both. Let me start with Dahlia, and say, what, and again, Dahlia wanted to be here today, and we figured out how to do it, and so I'm so grateful that you're here.
Yeah, and thank you.
But-
I'm grateful to be here. I'll tell everybody if something's a little wrong with my voice, it's because I have COVID. So I am quarantined in my room with the lovely background. And after staring at this for 5-6 days so far, we're going to be painting it the first time I can get out to the store. But I'm really happy to be here with everyone. Thank you.
We just want to know what color you're painting it.
White. We're going white.
So, Dahlia, just tell us a little bit about, I've now already advertised Parents Together, but tell us a little bit about why Parents Together came together, no pun intended, and how it's helping parents deal with social media issues, as well as just, in general, the issues of fellowship that you have, and dealing with a lot of the other, mental health issues that you've seen.
Absolutely. So first off, Parents Together, it's an organization made up of millions of parents across the nation, and it represents, our members are every race, religion, socioeconomic background, geographic location, political affiliations. This group, we are really a cross section of America. And what is so interesting is that as we're talking to our parents, as we're surveying what the biggest risks are, what the biggest problems are, what people are grappling with without fail, in almost every single household across America with children, what they tell us is that there is a real and intense struggle with social media and children. And unfortunately, it goes far deeper than most people even recognize. As Frances said, from content pushing eating disorders to, sexual exploitation online, our children are really navigating a minefield on social media. And most parents, because of the design of these products, most parents don't even really understand the full extent of it, even though they're in the same household with their children. And Randy, you hit the nail on the head when you said how trying the last 2 years are and how this has exploded, this crisis. And what was a problem before, what was a huge problem before, is even worse now. This truly is, as Frances has said many times, this is a public health emergency. And while parents have been feeling really alone in this, the good news is that people, once they start talking about it, once we understand that this is not the problem of the parents in their individual household, this isn't about why you have failed to be able to get your child off a product that has been deliberately designed to addict them and keep them on for endless hours. Once they understand it's not their problem, this is the problem of the social media companies. This is a problem of design, and this is a problem of social media companies that have no accountability. I want to give a little bit of texture to what the problem looks like, and so that people really do understand it is ubiquitous. Right now, 70% of parents are concerned that their kids are addicted to social media platforms. And the striking thing to me is that half of the kids, half of teens actually say they are addicted. And so we see, like, what is the problem with having kids online all the time? We see that without fail, the longer a child spends online, the higher their level of anxiety, the higher the level of mood swings, aggressive behavior, feelings of worthlessness. And it bears out in the statistics. Hospitalizations for eating disorders doubled last year. Last year, NCMEC, the National Center on Missing and Exploited Children, and what they do is they track reports of child sexual abuse online, reported that they had 30 million images of child sexual abuse online last year, which is a 35% increase from the year prior. Something is happening. And when you dial down a little bit more into what that really looks like, what does it really mean? Like, that feels like such a big number, 30 million images of child sexual abuse, a 35% increase. That feels, it sometimes feels a little bit too big to grasp. Think of this. In 2020, a European report found that 80% of self-generated child sexual abuse material that came from girls aged 11 to 13. 80% taking photos of themselves naked in sexual positions, doing sexual things. 11 to 13. That's how pervasive this is, and that's how concerning it is. And that's why we really need to act now.
Thank you, Dahlia. I just want to ask you one follow-up before I get to Warren, who's going to, tell us the warning signs and give us some help here. But in terms of the Parent Together organization and hearing from parents all over the country, probably the world, is there a particular age that you start hearing from parents a lot more? Or is it, as you said, it's ubiquitous, but is there a particular age? You just talked about girls 11 to 13, but just in terms of eating disorders or any of the kind of anxiety, is there a particular age that's a warning sign for you?
There's every age. And it pains me to say that, but it's true. So at my local school, our elementary school, I sat on the board that was a teacher parent administrator board. And we looked at problems that were propping up in the school, and we tried to figure out solutions and implement them together. And one of the things that the kindergarten teachers started flagging that was so shocking to me was they said that there was a new trend of kids not being 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds coming into kindergarten, not being able to do things like throw a ball, not being able to play hopscotch, not being able to not having the appropriate strength in their hands to be able to start writing as they normally had and had for generations. These were teachers who had 20, 30, 40 years experience saying these were things that, and skills, motor skills that kids had always had. And without fail, all of them, the entire team said, we are just seeing a decline in these skills. And it is because kids are looking at YouTube and they're not coloring. Kids are not playing outside like they used to. And it is changing who our kids are. We see that for young kids. One of the things that really is upsetting and all parents should just really be aware of is how degrading and horrible the filters are for children. Mm-hmm. So at 13 years old, by 13, 80% of girls have used a filter to change their face, to make them look what they think is conventionally more beautiful, or what the filter tells them is more beautiful. 80%. By the next year, 1/3 of them report that they don't like the way they look. Carries through. That will stay with them forever.
Forever.
Mm-hmm. And then I said the last thing, if I could just take it out of the teenage
and then
years.
I'm gonna get back to you, I promise. But if you want to quickly, you can.
Yeah, if I just take it out of the teenage years, one of the things plastic surgeons are reporting is that they're having 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds come into their offices with a picture of their filtered social media image. And they are asking to be surgically altered to match their image on social media. And what they're asking for is anatomically impossible. They literally could not do it. It is so common now that there's a name for it called Snapchat dysmorphia. So is there an age? Yes, it's every age.
Sorry, is a medical term for me.
Yeah.
And I go back, so I go to the doctor here. Screen time became a sad joke during the pandemic, but there's a lot more behind that. And, you see this all the time. And so, I don't want to just even ask you, we know that there are real needs. So give us just a sense of what you're seeing and what you're doing, doctor, because
Sure.
this is just, it's so important what you're doing.
Well, I think that first I wanted to thank you, as well as the organizers, in creating this forum. I think that as we're hearing all of these very worrisome and frightening facts, and Dahlia, thank you so much for speaking the truth, and and Frances for being a truth teller in terms of really acknowledging, shedding the light on this tragedy. But I also want to acknowledge the fact that we have a force behind us. And that force includes the young people. And so I'm really thrilled tonight to really have Lola and Devin share the screen and to share their voice, because that's a part of the solution. And similarly to the fact that
That was our surprise.
Oh, I'm
That's gonna
sorry.
happen next.
But
So stay with us if you thought
Yes,
that
that's
you
a
were gonna
teaser.
leave before the hour. We have two amazing young people who are about to join us.
So, and also the fact that it's Teacher Appreciation and Mental Health Awareness Month. I think that there is synergy in that. But I wanted to lead with that because I think that when we talk about what's really happening with your children and adolescents and families, because when children suffer, family suffers, community suffer. And I think, as you mentioned, Randy, this was going on before the pandemic, but it's only made worse after and during the pandemic. So when we're thinking about the mental health issues, the fact that 1 in 5 children or adolescents have a mental health or behavioral condition, even before the pandemic, and the fact that suicide was and still is the second leading cause of death for kids 10 to 24, and the fact that suicide has increased 76% over the last 2 decades before the pandemic only speaks to what kind of a situation we're in. It was more of the silent pandemic. The suffering was real, but I think on top of that, the pandemic has caused a real avalanche on top of the situation of social media, as well as what children were experiencing. As you mentioned, Randy, over 200,000 children in this country have lost a parent or a caregiver during COVID-19, and many of them were ethnic, racially minoritized youth and families and communities. So we definitely see that disproportionate impact. But what has happened since the pandemic? And since the pandemic has happened, I think, as you mentioned, I think teachers, parents are on the front lines. You experience it every day. And I think what's really challenging is really what you're seeing as well. And as a child and adolescent psychiatrist representing the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, which is about 10,000 child and adolescent psychiatrists, as well as trainees, with our mission to promote the healthy development of children, adolescents, and families, this pains us more than ever. The fact is that during the pandemic, compared to before the pandemic, we're definitely seeing an increased rise of mental health conditions. So as you mentioned, there's been a 51% increase in suicidal behaviors for adolescent girls going to the emergency department. But also what's really concerning is that there's also been a 24% increase of mental health conditions for children 5 to 11 going to the emergency department, and 31% for adolescents at the same time. But many of these conditions, it's not just for one condition, but compared to 2020, compared to 2021, compared to 2022, we're actually seeing kids come in with more conditions than ever. So starting in 2020, we saw an increase in eating disorders as well as tics. Not surprising, as you're hearing about some of really the challenges related to body image and some of the core developmental tasks of adolescence. So part of adolescence is really coming to terms with your body image and your body changes, and how has social media distorted that? The other core part of adolescence is really your peer group. And what's been challenging is that there hasn't been the same set of sort of peer experiences, because kids have not had the experience of seeing each other in person and during the isolation. And so instead of having your bad hair day or your bad skin day, you have your perfect Instagram day. And that doesn't necessarily give you a proper sense of what reality is. And then the third thing is really identity. And so really having the space and the time for young people to discover themselves and to learn about themselves in a real way. And I think that those are some of the challenges that young people have faced, which are really corresponding to their adolescence, which is really an important part of their development, which will have lifelong impacts. But in terms of the mental health arena, we definitely have seen increased rates of suicide, anxiety, depression. And I think some of the groups that we're seeing that more impacted are also actually youth of color, as well as sexual minority youth or LGBTQ plus youth. And so there was a recent high school survey that was really looking at levels of hopelessness as well as sadness for adolescents. And it was 44%. That's almost half of all kids in high school. And that's devastating. But when you look at those that are kids of color, as well as our sexual minority youth, that's even higher. And there was an estimated about 20% of young people in high school that were considering suicide, and 9% of them who actually tried to kill themselves. And those rates are even higher, as I mentioned, for kids of color, as well as our sexual minority youth. Bullying, racism, all of those things have continued to be a challenge, with a third of kids experiencing racism, whether or not online or in person during high school. And I think that sometimes the social media platforms makes it much easier to be able to put out your opinions, but not necessarily be considerate of the consequences. And so I think that there's a lot of things that are definitely experiencing, I think, youth and adolescents. And I think specifically in the mental health arena, we're definitely seeing an experience in our emergency departments, in our pediatric clinics, in our schools. And kids are really suffering. And I think as a way to really draw attention to that, I think it's making sure that they get the help that they need. And a lot of times what we say to parents, caregivers, as well as teachers or any caring adult speaking to kids is, if you have the privilege of knowing a young person, a child or adolescent, it's really important to just stop and pause, check yourself, and then ask them how they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And don't ask them in a way that you're okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, really ask them like, things are really tough right now. How are you doing? And really being open to that, but also being open to hearing not good news, and being open to taking the time and giving the attention so that that young person feels that they're important too. And so that you can really hear what's going on. Because I think one of the things that's been really shocking to a lot of parents, adults, and caregivers, and as child and adolescent psychiatrists, is really hearing some of these stories. Because we don't see what the young people are seeing. And so I think it's so important to really understand what their perspective is in order to best help them. Because maybe they have a very distorted sense of their appearance, who they are, what matters. And some of that has been shaped by their experience in social media and not necessarily in the real world, which is really where we want to bring them back to.
That's just amazing. And I want to just say to Dahlia, I want to bring Dahlia back in if we can. We may not be able to bring her back in, but I want to, there you are, great. I want to just bring Dahlia in and also ask Kelly Booz, who's not on camera right now, that because we want to bring just to Dr. Eng's point about bringing the kids in now and having them for the next 20 or so minutes. I want to though say to Dahlia and to Kelly, who's the head of our Share My Lesson platform, maybe we can do some follow-ups together in terms of warning signs, like and put it on your platform, something joint, Dahlia, on your platform, on our platforms, informed by Warren and Francis about what are the warning signs and what are the help tips and things like that we do together and get things out. Because that's the question right now. After we've now kind of dipped into this, I'm sure there's lots of questions about what can I do? What can we do? But I think it's important for us to get the kids up and to like really listen to them.
And just to reinforce that point, I think one of the most important things for us to remember is that even if we take care of our own kids, kids are so interconnected that if even one child in a community doesn't feel like they have support and something tragic happens to that child, it impacts all the kids. And so even if you think your kids are okay, it's really, really vitally important that we make sure that every single kid has someone, and that might even be another child. And that's why we need to figure out these scalable ways to make sure that we empower our kids to reach out to each other, because we can't leave even a single child behind.
So if we had one word, so for example, one of the things we're trying to do as the AFT is we're really pushing for community schools and wraparound services, so that guidance services and nurse services and other kind of support services are at a school level immediately, and that we can kind of observe things, and teachers have others to work, other professionals to work with, but really as an infrastructure change, really try to push that for as many schools as we can in the country. So that's one of the things we're trying to do. But in an immediate way, I'm hearing you all say, listen, listen and care, and we can't, and we have to really make sure lived experience is heard and felt and respected. That's what I'm hearing everybody say, right? Did I get it?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, and speak out. I know I was the gloom and doom before, but this is a story of hope. This is really a story of people fighting back. Like this, Frances, Frances and others who've come forward have just blown open the opportunity to change everything. All of this has been happening for years, and it has been slowly destroying our kids. And now we have a window, and we have a hold to fight back. And there are many ways we're fighting back. Teachers are some of the most powerful people in society. And when teachers speak in their teacher voice, people listen. And so we do have opportunities to do that. Yes, to the resources. We'll partner up on that, and we will offer the fight back too. We'd love everyone to join us.
And as we transition with a video and so I want to say thank you to Dahlia, and thank you to Warren, and thank you to Frances. As we transition with a video, as we get,
Sorry.
oh,
We got whisked back on.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. As we transition to a video, because Frances is staying with me with the kids. Thank
Sorry, my
you.
apologies. Can you grab my water?
I want to make sure that people know that to Dahlia's point, as we're transitioning, the AFT has a council of trustees who are on teacher pension funds all across the country. And tomorrow we will be moving a letter about the shareholder resolution that's at Facebook right now, in terms of just, really getting that kind of transparency and the kind of reforms that Frances was talking about. And to Dahlia's point about teachers, that's part of what we're doing in terms of trying to use our clout to trying to put attention on this. Okay, we're not going to do the video, I hear. We're going to just go right to everybody's here, and everybody got mic'd up, so we're going to go right to this. Okay, I just have to say, they're going to introduce themselves a little bit, but Lola Nordlinger, did I say that right? Yeah. Probably not, but thank you. Is a senior at Chevy Chase High School in Bethesda. And Devin Lee is a sophomore at Quince Orchard High School in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And they both have a bunch of things to tell us, but I feel like, oh my God, I feel like I'm back in class. I feel like I'm back teaching, but I'm really honored. We are really honored to be with the two of you. So why don't we just dive in? And Lola, I'm going to start with you. I just saw this amazing article that you did. I understand that you have learned these muck raking skills early in life. You didn't even get it from Frances here. You learned it yourself. And you got a bug for investigative journalism, and you're working on a documentary. So why don't you tell us what you see as the impact of social media.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to understand that even though I am a girl who uses Instagram, after Francis's whistleblower came to light, I learned a lot about what's actually going on behind my screen and understanding the fundamentals of an app that I use almost daily, and kind of getting an understanding that maybe this app wasn't working to my advantage necessarily, and I wasn't in control of everything I was seeing and posting, and how that was affecting me was really eye-opening. And just seeing that so many people are truly affected, like the effects of Instagram aren't fake. Suicide and eating disorders and depression and anxiety, those are real things and tangible things that maybe we don't see just based off of using the app, but they're truly felt and are directly correlated to something that my generation is hooked on.
Was there, and I'm going to invite Francis, do this with me, you
Mhm.
know, so I'm going to, but did you have one day an epiphany, or was this a gradual sense? How did you see this? How did you get so wise?
Well, I mean, I think it's an interesting perspective. My co-editors and I came up with the term voluntary victim, because everyone who I've talked to can agree that Instagram definitely isn't necessarily good for us. Yet I'm still using the app. We're all still using the app. No one's deleting the app. We're moving into a digital world and simultaneously coexisting in this real world. And so being able to kind of grapple with that and understand that it truly is bigger than just deleting the app. And so understanding that these things, the game is working against me. So that's how I'm able, I think, now to successfully be on the app and not feel these deep effects as much, and kind of understand that when I see a post, it's meant to make me feel this way. I'm not abnormal for feeling this way, and there's a driving force behind it.
I think so. We live in a society that doesn't coach young people on the idea that there are some problems that can be solved easily by individuals, and there's some problems that we have to solve together in coordination. And one of the things that I think is a key thing that's missing from how we're educating students right now is this idea that every minute that you are on Instagram is a minute your friends don't get to spend with you in person, right? Individual students don't get to make choices to opt out of the platform, individually. Imagine I'm a 16-year-old. I can be I'm done with this thing. I don't like how it's treating me. It doesn't value my autonomy or my dignity. I'm done. But if my friends don't choose to step away at the same time, there's no real choice. And I think that kind of, catch-22 situation is one that students live viscerally every day. People are, Facebook's own research says, young people were telling Facebook, I feel like I can't leave. If I leave, I'll be ostracized. But they're not taught to think about this idea, then what's the next step? Am I powerless, or do I still have power? And the answer is you do have power. It's just we have to figure out ways to coordinate together.
Right. Yeah.
Right. As the two of you were talking, I remembered that many of the leaders of the tech industry don't let their
They
own
don't.
kids
Yeah.
Use technology. So what do they know that we don't?
Yeah.
When you
And then I'm going to get you first, Francis.
when you
and then I go
ask
to
when you
Devin.
ask teenagers in these very prestigious private Silicon Valley high schools, they're like, oh, so how do you use social media? They'll be like, oh, we don't really do that, right? Think about that for a moment.
Yeah.
They know something.
Yeah, they know something. So Devin, you know a lot of some things too, which is,
Thank you.
so you are a Youth Creating Change Fellow, and you've been working with a team to use social media for social justice. So you want to tell us about it?
Yes. So the organization I'm a part of, Youth Creating Change, has a project called Social Media for Social Justice. And our goal is basically to educate students on how to identify misinformation and fake news in social media and what to do about it. And this is important because like our generation is really getting incorporated into this social media world, and we need to make sure that like we're not getting brainwashed by these big tech companies.
So I have, and I'm sure that every teacher and every parent is thinking about these questions. You know, what should parents do? What should teachers do? And at 5 minutes of, I'm going to get back to that question, but I want to ask you, both of you, what can the adults in your life do to better support you? Like how in terms of this, when I'm saying the adults, what we spent most of the time doing is analyzing a problem that people feel they don't even know that there was a problem. We didn't even know until Frances started talking about this. We actually, and Dahlia said it wonderfully, we didn't actually know that social media is intentional about creating this stress. So what can the adults do in your life to better support you?
Right. So, I mean, it's hard because our generation is the first generation to really, really grow up in this digital age. So I think it's hard to expect of adults to be using the app and understand it as much as we do and how integrated it is in our lives. But I think that we're smart enough to understand how coding works, how an algorithm is playing us. Like, it can't be a one-sided game if it's having such a negative impact on our lives. And I think that having real conversations with our parents that's not judgmental about being addicted to our phones, and having classes in schools that educate us on digital literacy and how to understand what we're doing and the kind of method behind an algorithm in the apps that we use, because we deserve to know how everything we use works and be fully informed. So I think it starts with educating everyone, having the same access to information on the apps that we're using so much.
Right.
Yes.
I think the best thing that students or that parents can do to help us kids is to just listen and to accept that this is a real problem, not just something that is easily fixable. A lot of parents say, "Oh my God, you're on your phone so much, you're addicted to social media. Like, why don't you just delete it?" Like, it's not that easy. It's that fear of missing out and other things that just keep us hooked. And it's not our fault that we're getting attached, because these multi-billion-dollar corporations are putting so much money into these algorithms, and they want to make it spotless to keep us hooked. So
I want to add a layer on that. Part of why we need to be so careful about how we phrase those kinds of sentences. So things like, why don't you just stop using it? When say that, Facebook's own research says that when they go and talk to kids about their experiences of getting, reaching out for help, when they hear sentences like, why don't you just stop using it? What it sounds like is, oh, the reason why I'm suffering, it's my fault.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that makes people feel more alone. And if you have a child that's already struggling with critical thoughts about themselves, we don't need to add more weight to that burden.
And deleting, if something's hard in the real world, we can't just get rid of it. And so that's applies to the digital world as well. If something's hard, we can't just get rid of it. We need to learn how to cope with it and use it and fix it so that it's not bringing on negative feelings and turn the story.
Which leads me to, because I want to get to, and then I'm going to ask everybody their last thoughts. There are actions that we can do together. In addition to listening and caring and understanding that there's no quick fix, and deleting and pretending that it doesn't exist for digital natives ain't going to be, I know I used ain't going to be the answer. But the action steps, and we said this at the beginning of this hour about, look what Europe has done. And the United States could catch up to Europe. Europe is light years ahead of us right now with the Digital Services Act. I think that's what it's called, the Digital Services Act. And we have to bring those similar safeguards here. It's not about censorship. It's about bringing that kind of safeguard and that kind of transparency that Frances talked about so beautifully and inspirationally, informatively earlier. That's number one. Number two, Share My Lesson, I already talked about Share My Lesson, has a wealth of lesson plans and activities available. And we're now developing a hub for resources for educators and parents that we plan to release this summer. And glad that we're working with parents together on these things. So that's another thing we're doing. The third thing is some advocacy, like Dahlia was talking about, which is the Make, Mark, Listen campaign that's going on. The Facebook's annual meeting is later on this month in May. And as I suggested earlier, we are prepared to do and be engaged in a significant shareholder action on behalf of our members and on behalf of them who own as their pensions, as part of their pensions, a whole bunch of Facebook stock. So our voices together, we hope, will be loud enough that in that commercial market, which is where so many of these social media companies really traffic, they will listen when they haven't been listening before. And so our friends at Parents Together are doing something similar. They're developing an open letter from parents to big tech, including Mark Zuckerberg, to tell them that our children are not products and our children are not profit centers. And so hopefully we will be doing a bunch of these things together. But I want to just, before I say thank you to all of our guests, I want to just ask these two amazing young adults and Frances, if you have any last words for us. So I'm going to start this time with Devin and then Lola, and then I'll go to Frances as we end tonight. Any last words?
So the question you asked about the what parents can do to help support students and kids on social media, I think parents might be treating it like a weed at sometimes, and we need to get it from the root. We need to actually make a change in how the algorithms work instead of just, like we were saying, deleting it, because that's just gonna just gonna cut it off, and it's not gonna get the root of the problem. Yeah.
A gardener on top of everything else.
I think that having a real understanding of the difference of the concepts between the digital world and the real world, and that Instagram isn't real world, it's a competition, and being able to learn how to differentiate that and associate these negative feelings that we feel on a daily basis and be able to connect that back to Instagram and Facebook and these social media apps that are designed to make us feel this way. And I think just giving everyone a general understanding and letting them know that it's okay that they're feeling this way and it's not their fault. It's attributed to something that has been given to our generation to deal with that's never been dealt with before. So we're all learning how to do it together, and there is a way to make it better for everyone who's on the app and using it.
Thank you. Frances, any last words for us?
People often ask me for like a laundry list of like, what do we need to do to fix Facebook? Or what do we need to do to fix Instagram? What do we need to do to fix social media in general? And I always say, I don't, the way we got here was not enough people were sitting at the table, right? That there are many, many trade-offs that have gotten resolved over and over again on the side of profit, because that's the only thing that Facebook actually has to report out every year or every quarter. We need to change kind of what that standard is. So this could be via law, or it could just be a social pressure, via organizing. It's much, much more effective for us to change the quality of our relationship with the company, in the sense of every month they should have to publish a list saying, this is what they did this month to protect our kids. This is what they did. This is what we did this month to show, not say, but show that we value your autonomy and your dignity. There's a lot of really low-hanging fruit that Instagram could do tomorrow that would help kids be better in school. Imagine if instead of popping up a little thing saying, hey, you've been on here for 20 minutes, do you want to go to bed? It said at noon, hey, when do you want to go to bed tonight? And for the 2 hours before bedtime, Instagram got a little bit slower and a little bit slower and a little bit slower till bedtime happened, and you just want to go to bed. The solutions exist. There are product changes, not censorship, product changes that will make people happier, healthier, that will make our kids feel more in control, that will make our communities work better. But the only way we'll get those is by changing the standard to not just be like, please fix these 5 bugs, but instead be like, every single month, you need to put your best minds on this and show us how you're going to value our autonomy and our dignity, because that's how we'll actually get ongoing, steadily improving benefits and change.
So today, what you've heard is from these amazing panelists, Dalia Hashad, Dr. Warren Eng, Lola Nordlinger, Devin Lee, and Frances Hogan. We've just scratched the surface of a problem that's not of our making, of media that has been helpful in various different ways of democratizing things and giving us access to information, but that has real consequences and real problems to it, and has had free rein to not deal with those consequences. And so we're trying to figure out how we help our kids be okay, and how we deal with these kind of consequences and ramifications that Facebook and other social media companies do, sometimes by design, sometimes inadvertently, and how we make sure that we as a community, parents, families, teachers, sheroes, whistleblowers, how we actually make sure that the social media companies work for us as opposed to our having to deal with these kind of terrible side effects. It's the scratching of a surface. We'll do more of this, and I just can't thank our panelists enough for actually making sure to make this real and showing us this anxiety, it isn't okay, but not our fault. And if we listen to each other a lot more and we try to make these companies more transparent and more accountable, we can change this, and we can help the mental health outcomes of our kids. Thank you very, very much, everybody, for being with us today.